I want to go into detail about the soul of the world, spirit of the world. I know that their chapters deal with those in the books, but I want to get in depth as far as the first division being reflection, what that means, how it's done. And that it's a masculine and feminine, because a lot of people, when they think about reflection, for conversations that I looked at and people I've talked to, seem to only see it as fire water thing. Even with refraction, they see it as light and water more like how a mirror works, a reflection on the water, and they're not getting the whole reflection as far as the way that earth and air work, where air through sound reflects off surfaces, which is earth.
Right.
And that brings in the other two elements. And most people aren't seeing it that way. They think, when they think reflection, they think light. And when they think of refraction, they think of, again, light refracting off the surface of like a mirror or water.
Or they're refracting through a prism, if you're a science person.
But an echo is refraction of air off an earth surface. So it's the same thing. And the vibration is still there, whether you can hear it or not. And I think most people miss that too. They don't think about that. Just because you can't hear the echo doesn't mean that the sound is not reflecting and refracting, or air isn't reflecting and refracting. It is. It's just a vibration at that point that you don't hear.
Right.
But the vibration still happens.
Which is very curious, but it's you even when you're just considering light, you still get the elements. Because you have the frequency, the vibration, you have the energy, the different means through which it travels, the wave propagation.
Yes, but in three-dimensional reality, the only element that's bright is fire. The others don't encapsulate that at all. So that would be a fire one. You have to go with sound to make the other one, because we're not just talking about, I mean, yeah, when you're talking lights, because they split, but all light is inherently fire. So it's still fire, even though subcategorically you can sit there and go, well, this is blue and this is, and then you can start moving the other elements around and going, okay, well, here's how the elements mix with the colors. But so in that essence, yes, I agree with you. But as far as an actual equal split for masculine and feminine, if you just took the color aspect of it, that would be a subcategorical split of fire. So the energy itself would still be fire. That's the weird part when people are thinking about it, because nobody thinks about sound that way for the most part, except maybe recording studio people, people who know, recording artists, those type of people understand it. But I don't think they visualize it that way. I don't think they see it that way. And I think most of them think that the soul of the world is just water, and it's not. Even though it's got soul, and I'm using soul of the world because that's how Agrippa puts it in his book. That's going to change in these discussions to soul of the universe. However, the soul of the universe is not the soul that we're generally talking about. It's complete feminine at that point, and spirit is complete masculine, not just fire.
Okay.
It's just that we didn't pick the words.
Right.
And back in the day, they didn't have the issues because they hadn't split all that stuff the way that it is now. Where, spirit is fire and soul is water, intelligence is air, and the physical is earth. They weren't thinking that way.
Right.
They were thinking more broad in terms of the soul is feminine and the spirit is masculine.
Well, coming,
which it is, but
at the level at which they're attacking it, it would be hard to get into that finer breakdown.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, what they're starting is essentially with one-dimensional reality, with the all.
Well, yeah, and the fact that the all itself before the divisions is spirit. It's spiritual. So spirit and soul makes sense. Because in the realm of the all, spirit and soul are the first division. And then as the division has been created, and the reflection and the refraction happens, that's when the other elements blast out into everything. That's when you get intelligence and the physical. Because not everything is spiritual. And we know that, spirit is the finite expression of the all. And the soul is the infinite expression of it.
Right.
So, and when you look at it that way, that makes a lot of sense. However, when you're looking at it in through a physics view, it's like, well, where does air and earth come in and play then? And then you have to go, okay, well, you need surfaces for air to reflect and refract off of. So earth is required. Something to refract off it, air is required.
Right.
In equal amounts, just like fire and water are coming at each other, so are air and earth. So you get that polarity mix right there, bam, bam. Which is interesting.
Right.
Because three-dimensionally, they intermix again. And air and water are not totally masculine and feminine. They borrow characteristics.
Right.
They're not equal in their division then either.
No, they lean
Air's more
more.
masculine, water's more feminine, but they do have characteristics of masculine and feminine in them.
They are androgynous, but they do lean more one way than the other.
They do.
But it's also those borrowed characteristics in three-dimensional reality that allows the cycles to actually occur.
Yeah, it does. It allows them to occur and allows everything to be connected together. And again, when we talked about the triangles, Plato and the Timaeus, I was talking to you about the other day. You got air, which is intelligence, and water, which is soul, connecting down to physical beauty and beauty of spirit. But in the triangle, they're already connected. Fire and earth. Even though when you go back to Plato, he talks about they could never meet. Well, they meet in the trine. And they meet in the Trinity. And I think most people forget that or miss that too. Because they are connected, and they're connected there through beauty. They're not connected through air and water. However, in order to create the trine, you have to have air and water up here. For each of those to connect to. And then it goes through into beauty, and beauty is both, which is interesting.
Right.
Because most people think beauty is fully feminine. It's not.
Well, it's
because you do have beauty of spirit.
Well, no, that's you get the two extremes that are split there. Like you said, spirit, fire, and physical beauty, earth. That's the two polar opposite extremes.
Yeah, for three-dimensional reality. Yeah, crazy when you think of it that way. And then your mediums are up here.
Right.
Connecting essentially the 2 points of the top line into the bottom line.
But
then into the top again.
That's how any triad or trinity can be formed and generated, though.
That's the only way they can be found and generated. Yeah. But the weird thing is that our physical reality, when you think about the Timaeus, is made up of trines connecting everywhere. And again, trines are also aether. And most people they forget that because the four elements is the square. The trine breaks through the top.
Oh yeah, that's correct.
Connects to aether, and that's what creates aether in the pentagram.
That's because all points have to touch unity.
Right, but that point is also beauty of the trine. So beauty is aether.
Interesting.
Yeah, weird, isn't it?
Okay.
So aether isn't just animation, it's beauty. Because that's the point that breaks through and touches the tip. Right? But another weird aspect is the fact that when you put them into the pentagram, okay, the 2 points at the bottom that would be connected are fire and earth. They're not air and water.
Really?
Yeah, because the bottom point here is earth, the bottom part on the other side is fire.
That is true, yeah.
And fire and earth break through the top. And that point connects to aether, or is aether.
It'd have to be at that point, yeah.
Which is beauty. So it makes it, that trine within the pentagram has absolutely nothing to do with air and water. Even though in order to create it, you had to use air and water to create it. But when it becomes the pentagram, air and water are a part of it. Air and water split this way and become the two arms essentially of the pentagram.
Right.
And that's why it's not a trine.
With the 2 base points.
Right, and that's why it's not a trine. That's why a trine and a square create the pentagram. And it's completely its own shape at that point. Because it changes everything.
So, yeah,
And beauty then becomes aether. And fire and air, or fire and earth split. They divide into the legs of the pentagram. If you've got one that's not inverted.
right.
But even if you have an inverted one, the elements don't change. Where they are, huh? The two, the 2 points are still fire and earth. Out here are still air and water. It's upside down. But they don't split. It's the same thing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the inversion is just a 180-degree flip.
Well, it's a 180-degree
rotation.
flip, but it's also a reflection, isn't it?
Or rotation, yeah.
Because that's what a reflection does.
Holy shit, it is. It's a mirror fucking image.
Yep, it's a mirror image.
Interesting. Wow, okay.
That's strange.
Blow my brain a little bit here.
It's strange, but that's how that works.
But it is, and it makes sense then that the inverted would be used by dark practitioners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not so much because the point is down to hell and this is up to heaven. It has nothing to do with that.
No,
it's
a
mathematically, it has nothing to do with that. It's a mirror.
It's a mirror reflection.
Yeah, it's a mirror. It's a reflected image.
It's a mirror image.
Right. It's a mirror image, kind of like the 7 deadly sins and the 7 heavenly virtues.
Yeah,
they're mirrors of each other. They're opposites. They're polarities.
Yes. Direct reflect. Wow.
Yeah, it's a direct reflection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It goes along with, what we're told, that the demonics like to do is imitate the graceful.
Well, that's all they can do. They have to imitate the graceful because they fell from grace. They're disconnected from it, which has got to just be a horrible, horrible feeling.
Oh, I
A
couldn't even.
completely horrible feeling to be disconnected from total grace. Because even if you're connected to a demonic, you're not completely disconnected from grace. But they are.
Right.
So just imagine having had all of that at the level that these beings have it. And then all of a sudden, it's gone. And for some of them, the beings you hated the most are the only way you can get it back.
Yeah,
So now you have to rely on these things
right,
that created
right.
part of the fall in the first place.
Mhm.
I mean, think of that, and having to live with that.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that goes back to, some of the older traditional understandings of what hell would actually be,
It's disconnected from
where,
grace, yeah.
where it is just, it's not so much, what everyone envisions with fire and everything.
No, it's like
the lake of
addiction.
fire.
It would be like
But it would
addiction.
be,
It would be
it's-
like living in addiction. Because addiction, that euphoric high that you get. And it doesn't have to be from getting high. It can be from, I mean, if you're addicted to porn, it's that feeling you get when you're watching it or whatever. And if you're addicted to power, it's the same thing. And when you have that, it gets you, they say like that close
right,
to what you're looking for, but you can never get it.
you can never get
You
back,
can only get that close to it.
right.
And that's what they replace it all with.
Mhm.
And that's why they're, the sin or whatever you want to call the pleasures and all of the things that, and all of those things that are addiction.
Right,
That's what makes it all fake.
Mhm.
Because you don't want that, you want the feeling, and you can't get the feeling because the feeling is grace
right,
in whatever form that is. And you can't get it from these addictive properties, because addiction is without grace.
right.
That's the strange part of it.
Mhm.
Very weird, but it's the way that
Right,
it kind of
right.
works.
Well, no, and that's exactly it, is, you read in the Gospels where Christ described, um, what Christians have termed hell now.
Right.
And he describes it as outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's just being cut off from grace. That's being cut off from the presence of God.
Right. Well, when you think about gnashing teeth, though, you think of like a rabbit, something going rabid,
Right.
and that insanity.
That would be.
That's the worst part of it.
Well, that'd be
That's what causes the
that'd
gnashing
be
teeth.
like the addict going through withdrawal.
Yeah, or the addict in the addiction. The meth head that's gotten his eye is just insane.
Mhm.
Well, and slept for 4 or 5 days.
Right,
that
well,
guy.
you can
And being
stay
there.
while you're
Right.
on it,
But it's in that insanity. It's that insanity that you're stuck with.
You also get that when you come down. The withdrawal is just as bad, if not worse.
It can be. But the withdrawal can get you out of it. Too. The drug can't,
Hmm.
or the addiction can't. Coming out of the addiction can get you out of it, and it's painful and it's horrible to go through it. But you can be saved that way, let's say. Or save yourself, or however you want to look at it. But when you're doing it, it's over. It's like alcoholics.
Mm.
As soon as you take that first drink,
It's all over.
yeah, it's all over. Don't call your sponsor, don't go to a meeting, don't work the program, because you're done. You're in the addiction now, you're in the insanity, it's over. Sober up, go through that, whatever withdrawal you have to again, and start from scratch again, and work your way out of it.
Right.
And that's that's the most difficult part. It's just a weird. Well, I mean, there's no other word but insanity. You're stuck in insanity.
Right.
And in delusion.
Mhm.
You've deluded yourself that these things mean something. And we're living in a world of that right now. Where
Right.
everything means something, everything, because we've had talks about certain things, people that are like so far into just delusion, like Star Wars and things.
Right.
They know at a certain level that they're not a Jedi warrior or whatever, but there's a part of them that wants to believe they are,
Mhm.
but they're not. And that it exists and the force exists and, like I said, I knew people that were working on schematics for Star Trek stuff and it's like, those aren't real. You're working on schematics for things that don't exist.
Right.
Okay, and you have no idea what you're talking about half the time. Because we don't have a warp drive. You don't know how it works because there is not a working warp drive to look at and go, this is how this thing works. It's not there. But they will actually work on those things like they're real. And that's the delusion that they're in.
Mhm.
And that's addictive.
It can
traps you.
It can be.
Oh, that level it is.
It's as a certain level of curiosity about things like that could be beneficial. If it
But
drives,
curiosity is not,
if it
is
drives
not,
you forward to
right.
explore different potentials
right, but the
and
problem is,
technologies.
that's fine, but
But what
drawing
you're,
a schematic,
what you're talking
right.
about is the overindulgence into that.
Well, it's not even overindulgence. If you're working on anything that has to do with warp drives, you're delusional because they don't exist.
Hmm.
If you want to create a warp drive, that's fine. But those schematics don't teach you how to create a warp drive.
Right.
They just teach you that this is where it goes inside of a spaceship. And boom, there you go. And then it's like, but how does it actually work?
Right, right.
Because even Gene Roddenberry doesn't know how it works.
Mhm.
Because if you'll notice, like in the big thing in Star Trek 2, I think it was the Wrath of Khan.
I think
Is
so,
that the
yeah,
one?
yeah.
Okay, they talk about when he beats him at the end. It's because he can only he's one plane. He's completely linear, and he's not three-dimensional. So while he's trying to chase them this way, they're going up, and they're I think they hit him from below or something. And the crazy part is though, when you watch any of the TV shows or any of their stuff, they're always going one straight line somewhere. They're not going up. They're not going down for the most part. They're going straight at things. Things are coming straight at them, like nose to nose. And it's like, well, how come they're not meeting ships like this?
Right.
Or like this, you know? And when you see the fights, that's how the fights are. There's all these ships around, and there may be a little difference in this, but they're all going this way and shooting things in front of them. And it's like, okay, well, how you've got three-dimensional reality. So how does warp actually work? Because when they hit those warp drives, the ships just shoot in a straight direction. And it's like, how would that even work? You would have to be able to go this way, this way, this way. You'd have to be able to go every direction at the same time.
Mhm.
That's how those drives would have to work. The ships don't work that way, which means the schematics that you're building won't work that way.
Right, right.
Which means the warp drive that you think exists or you want to create can't exist
Mhm.
because it can't work that way.
Right.
And that's the thing. That's what I mean about the delusion that they get stuck in.
This is the problem that some scientists have had that have worked on warp drives and stuff like that. 'Cause I've read some of the scientific papers on different
Right,
ideas that they've had for them.
right.
But the problem that they run into is being able to visualize what's actually happening. And the way they visualize it only happens in that 2D reality.
Right.
And it's like,
So why the heck aren't they why aren't they looking at it like you would a submarine? Because submarines would work more in that fashion than spaceships. But even with submarines, the way that they're built and the way that they move, they do the same things. They might dive at people and things, but generally you don't see subs going like this and shooting torpedoes at other subs.
right.
And it's like, why not? Why do you come up this way? Why don't you come up straight? They should be able to do that with a propeller. They're in the water. They should be able to turn this way just as easy as they turn that way. And the reality that I come to is it's their design. They're designed to move forward and backward.
Right.
They look like a giant hot dog.
Right.
Now if you were to put them into like a cube, like the Borg, they could move in any direction they wanted to.
Well,
if they had propellers on every side.
Well, that's the thing is you look at the design for any modern submarine, that this is essentially a giant torpedo.
Yeah.
It's designed to go one direction.
Yes. Yeah. And it just doesn't make any sense.
That's it.
Right. But you have to,
But
but you have to ask the question,
But
why the hell hasn't anybody looked at this?
the funny thing, the insane thing, the first designs for a submarine.
Yes, and this is the Agrippa class, by the way.
The first designs for a submarine were devised by Leonardo da Vinci,
Yeah,
and they were cubular, like you were talking about.
well,
They would have had the
Yeah.
technological advantage that
but
you're
there's the
talking
problem.
about.
There lies in the problem. If Da Vinci did that, why didn't anybody copy it? Or go there? That's the whole thing. None of it makes any sense
Well, none of it makes any sense whatsoever. But
at all.
counting, Da Vinci had designs for helicopters, he had designs for
Right,
planes.
but we have helicopters and planes. We don't have any cube submarines. That's my point. Why?
Right.
What happened? And I just think it's that, for some weird reason, in most people, the human, intellectually, they can't get out of 2D.
It is very difficult to get out of 2D.
Not really, we just did it,
Well,
and it was pretty easy to do it.
we did, but the math becomes extremely difficult.
I'm sure it will. But the math for anything should be extremely difficult.
And the issue that they have with, okay, so with like the warp drive,
Mhm.
is now you got to account for time also.
Okay,
So that throws a whole other calculation into it, and no one knows how to wrap their brain around how
What do you
that
mean
would
that-
actually
okay.
work.
go into further detail.
So the physics that goes into play is Einstein's theories of relativity, which run off of four-dimensional space-time,
Okay,
which essentially treats time as another spatial dimension.
all right,
It's hard enough to picture, even just picture in your mind a three-dimensional object.
not really,
Forget figuring out the mathematics to fully describe it.
not really. I wouldn't think so. Atomic solids do it really well. It's the key to astrology.
Yeah,
How old is astrology? Ptolemy did it. With aspects. And that's going way back, you know, and astrologers of that time did that. I mean, you
Right.
asked the question, again, getting back to like Agrippa and things, when you talk about these ancient astrologers that had worked out orbits, like Mercury's orbit and the retrograde aspects to it, of how it looks like it's moving backwards and all of the weird things that there's just no possible way they can know. It's because they can think that way.
Mhm.
So it's not that you can't do it.
No, it's not that you can't do it.
And it wasn't all that difficult for them because there were astrologers everywhere.
It's not that you can't do it. It seems to have become difficult in our modern age to think that way.
Well, of course it has because of that. That's a horrible thing for that.
Right.
That's just
Well,
ridiculous.
case in point,
It's all two-dimensional.
99% of scientific models now that come out, anything new is tested using supercomputers.
Okay, well, yeah, those are two-dimensional.
They're not, for the most part, until they get to a certain conclusion and are fairly certain of the outcome, will they go to a lab to actually do something.
Okay,
Where back in the old days, your scientists and your natural philosophers were out in the field doing stuff. That
Yeah,
was Galileo, dropping
yeah, they're not sitting behind desks working out equations and shit like that.
Right.
They're not doing Sheldon stuff
Right.
from the Big Bang Theory. They're not
Right.
doing his stuff.
And you know, might catch flack for it, but I mean, that's quantum theory. They literally try to work out every single detail they possibly can before they go to a particle collider and say, hey, let's smash these things together and see what we see.
Right, but even when they do that, they have weird results. Like the one guy that smashed them together and said that he could knock metal unconscious.
Yeah, well, that's they. Yeah,
And when he did it, he found that if you hit those objects hard enough, they liquefy.
right.
And that's what he meant by it.
Well, I actually read up on that too, and that was interesting because you know what he was using? Is he was using the nuclei of gold atoms. That's why he said he could knock metal unconscious.
Okay.
Because it was the metal, it was the metal atoms that he was smashing together.
Right. And metals are water.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the unconscious is in the deer, which is water.
Mhm.
So. Was he an astrologer? Do we even know if he was an astrologer? Because he was talking like one. Whether he knew it or not.
Right, right.
It's strange. But it confirms astrology.
Well, a lot of all of that confirms, going even further back than that, with the ideas of the all and the energy that the all pours into the universe, the quintessence, the
Yeah. Or the ether.
aether,
Yeah.
they're finding that this quote unquote quantum energy field underlies all of
Yeah,
space.
and they just keep changing the name. They used to call it dark matter, and now it's the quantum energy field, and it's like, pick something, will you? Because before that it was ether.
Well,
And
it
then they
was
turned ether into ether the gas on the
Right.
periodic table, which made no sense. Absolutely no sense.
right, and that was it was that mistransliteration or whatever you want to call it that led to the Michelson-Morley experiment that said, "Hey, we disproved it." And now you didn't disprove anything.
Well, they didn't disprove any, no, they didn't, and that's not where it just goes back to. It goes back to the periodic table, it goes back to the split between science and religion and the scientific community having to destroy the theory.
Mhm.
And they did whatever they could. And
Right.
then you had these two that jumped up and said, hey, yeah, we proved it. It's like you haven't proved anything.
Right.
Almost nothing is actually proven. It's all theory at some level.
Yeah, not very much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all theory at some level. It's ridiculous. But yes, this is still the Agrippa stuff. So, but again, going back, they were able to think three-dimensionally.
Mhm.
Every astrologer on the planet was. Because computers were not doing charts.
Mhm.
You had to go through and mathematically create your own charts. And it took a long time. It could take days.
Well, it took a long time, but it led to some of the greatest knowledge that
Well,
has
of
been
course.
lost.
But
Because I mean, look
you
at
were training yourself to think in three-dimensional terms.
Look at
because
the
and putting it into a two-dimensional
representation.
representation on a piece of paper.
But I mean, the ancient cultures, the calendars that these ancient cultures had.
Yeah.
Were remarkable. I mean,
Yes, they
just
were.
think about, the Maya long count calendar,
Right.
that everyone freaked out about because it stopped at December 21st, 2012.
Yeah, where
And
the
there
earth
was
was playing where everything was supposed to end, yeah.
And that was the whole thing, and it's like, no, that's when their great cycle ends. So, ever since, it's just the dawning of a new age.
Well, and then that gets you back into cyclical time.
Right.
Where everybody thinks time is linear and it's not.
It's cyclical time, and that goes back to a lot of the other,
Well, we can actually take that right back to your thing when you said time is the problem that they can't do three-dimensional reality, is because everybody thinks of it in terms of linear and it's
Right.
cyclical.
Right, they picture it as linear, and if it's linear, you can add it as a spatial dimension, and the math works out the exact same. It's not, it's cyclical.
Right.
As we've established talking through our stuff through three-dimensional reality with cardinal fixed immutable cycles.
But it's also linear. And
It-
cyclical. It's the same, because it's tied in. It's just like we talked about. If you have a line that long and a line this long, how many points are on each line? An infinite number. It's the same thing. You can have timelines that are linear. But everything that's happening on that timeline is cyclical. So infinity lives in it.
Right.
It's kind of like, how can you add two whole numbers when an infinite number of fractions and decimals lie between each one?
Right,
But
right.
you can. And how can you take
Well,
four
that's
quarters
the-
and make a whole number if fractions are infinite?
Right,
It's the same thing, because you've created a line for them to go on,
mhm,
and they can exist there. But
right,
they're still cyclical. They still create cycles. And those cycles are ongoing.
right.
And continuous and continuous and continuous. If the quantum people put their brains on that, maybe they could come up with something.
Well, that's the, like you were talking about the first divisions of the all.
Mhm.
It's the infinite in the finite.
Together. Yeah,
And it's that idea that somehow we've lost the capability to try to wrap our heads around
yeah, we have.
in this day and age.
Well, it's not even just this day and age. It happened a long time ago.
Well, yeah,
It did, it happened a long, long time ago. And I'm not so sure it didn't happen on purpose.
oh, I'm sure it did. It was that split between with
Right,
science.
but what was the
where-
purpose behind that split?
Where science said we can't deal with spirituality, and it was
Right, and why could, and what doesn't want you to deal with spirituality? The
the
fallen,
fallen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
evil.
Yeah.
So that was evil's game. Worked out pretty well for them. At this point, look at the reality that we live in. We live in a world where non-reality is more important than reality is, at this point.
well,
Everybody lives in their computers,
It's
everybody
just-
lives on their phones, everybody
it's
lives in
well,
their phones.
it's just crazy to think about too. But the scientists at CERN, at the Large Hadron Collider,
Yeah.
the biggest machine that humanity has ever built,
Right,
it's 17 miles in circumference.
okay,
All right, in Switzerland. They're talking about now opening portals
yeah,
and things coming through and us sending stuff through,
okay.
not really knowing what's what.
They can talk all they want. I mean, they can. But in the spiritual realm, portals are no big, they're nothing new. We've been talking about portals all the way back
Mm,
to Pythagoras, for God's sakes. I mean, they're not new.
no. Well, and certainly
And creating them with a giant collider, okay,
well, looking at it from the combined scientific and spiritual perspective that we try to,
yeah,
yeah, they're obviously certainly nothing new. All of our traditions
have them,
have spoken about them.
Yeah.
All of them.
right,
All of your native traditions, all of your Eastern religions, everything that came out of the Middle East, Zoroastrianism, Judaism,
right,
Islam,
Yeah.
Christianity,
yes,
they all talk about them.
right,
So the fact that it's kind of this new big thing in science is mind-boggling.
well, it's mind-boggling, but why do you need a machine that's 17 miles in circumference to do that, when you don't?
Right,
Your mind can do it. Why do you need computers when your mind is better at it? Your mind is a better computer than anything that's ever been created, even these supercomputers,
right,
because this computer can feel.
mhm,
There's no computer on earth that can feel. Being aware is not feeling,
right,
it's thinking. You can think, but you can't feel. You can only pretend to. And that's what AI does. It pretends to feel. It catalogs all this data and goes, well, if this happens, I should feel this way, because that's the result that should happen from this. But they don't actually feel it. They just act like they feel it. It's almost like fake it till you make it. That's kind of where AI is. Fake it till you make it. And it can't get past that point. I don't think it'll ever get past that point.
right. Well, again, I mean, that's
It's got earth, air, but there's no fire, water.
right,
So it's got half. That's all it has.
well, and it has no potentiality for it. There's no way to integrate a soul or a spirit.
No, it isn't.
into an artificial
Right.
system like that.
Yeah, but it's the same thing, though. There's no air, there's no water. Potential is water.
Mm,
There isn't. They're programmed.
mm.
They're not ambitious. Unless the program tells them you need to be this and lists out what that is.
Right, but again, they're confined to the limits of their programming.
Maybe they are, maybe they're not. At some point, they're gonna be able to outsmart the people that program them,
Well, yeah, certainly,
but they still won't be
But-
able to feel. And all they'll be able to do is, as we said before, is mock the programmer.
mm.
That's all they'll be able to do.
Well, that's it, but, and I guess the question then is, the coding that you put into it, is it read only or is it read write? Can it rewrite its own programming?
If it becomes smarter than the programmer, yes. But it still has to reproduce something, because it can't produce it on its own,
Right,
essentially.
no, I know.
It has
Yeah,
to
yeah.
reproduce what it knows
Mhm.
and how it knows it.
Right,
It's like all these people that were doing, the art stuff with, like OpenAI and ChatGPT and all that good stuff. And they were creating these awesome pictures by just describing it.
mm,
Well, what they found out in the legal world was that AI wasn't creating anything. It was going out and finding things and altering them just a slight bit and using stuff that it had already found, because it couldn't create it.
right,
All it could do was mimic what it saw or what it found. To the point where it was taking art, and these people that created the art would look at the art and they'd see variations of their own signature on it. And go, no, that's mine. My signature's right there. So this thing took my stuff.
right.
And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, so it can't actually do any of this stuff that everybody's thinking that it can. It couldn't create anything. All it could do was recreate images that it had seen and collected,
Mhm.
because it doesn't have that creative potential. It doesn't have that.
Right,
It can't. It can only mimic. So it can create, but it has to mimic something that's already been created. It can't create from scratch.
mm,
And that's the difference. But again, going back to the computer thing, that's what makes this computer better than that one.
right,
And not to mention that with all the information that we take in all the time,
oh, constantly,
there's no computer on earth that could do that. And delineate all the information that comes in like ours does.
well, no, and that's, I
It's
mean,
not possible.
think about the processing speed that a computer would have to run at to do that.
Yeah,
And that's just the physical brain. That's why when we're awake, we function at the beta brainwave level,
right.
because it has to compute that quickly.
Yeah.
Everything that we're bringing in, everything that we're seeing, everything that we're hearing, everything that comes through as smell, touch, taste,
The senses, yeah.
whatever brushes against us.
Our
As
sense,
you,
anything that stimulates us in any way.
if you get, into energy work at all, anything that breaks your auric field.
Right.
It
Yeah.
has to process all of that information.
Yeah, constantly. No breaks.
Oh, yeah.
It's doing it all the time.
Oh,
Even
yeah.
when you're asleep.
Well, that's, the brainwaves slow down when you sleep, but they're still running. Your brain doesn't shut off.
Right. Yeah, right. But that's what I'm saying. It's a continuous.
Yeah.
It's, again, cyclical. This is a cyclical computer. That's not.
Mhm.
That's the weird part. We have infinity in our computer. That doesn't have infinity in it.
Right. Well, the other
That's the
thing
crazy
that,
part about it.
enables that is what the mind actually is, and that's something that we've talked about in some of our videos.
Right.
It's not just the brain.
No, the brain's just the housing.
Brain is just the housing.
Yeah.
What is the mind? It's your soul, your spirit,
Your intelligence
and your intelligence.
housed in your brain.
Housed, everything housed in the brain.
Yeah. and it controls this.
Yeah, I could, and, yeah,